Welcome back. We have another wonderful teaching plan today with Marcus Warner and Nick Harang from Deeper Walk International. We recently did a teaching on emotional capacity, and this is the follow-up. We're going to be learning about emotional capacity and going a little deeper. It's part 2. At the end of the last teaching, we were letting everyone know if they had any questions for Marcus in particular or Nick, that just to send them to the email, and we did get one. So I thought that we would start by letting Marcus and Nick give us a little insight and into this question. So is humility an emotion? Does God humiliate his people, or does life in general, such as past mistakes, trauma, physical, mental limitations, do those things cause humility? Is there a difference in your answers when considering Old versus New Testament? So, Marcus, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And, it sounds like a little bit of a sad question too, kind of like somebody's experienced some humiliation and pain and shame in their life. But I think that, let me just start by differentiating some terms. First of all, humility versus humiliation. And the idea here is, in the Bible, humility is not an emotion. Humility is kind of it's a mindset, if you will. And so the way that the Bible tends to talk about humility is in high and low. It is often using high and low terminology when it describes humility. So the idea is, God says, don't try to put yourself on top. Don't fight for the highest position. Don't try to be the leader of everybody. Instead, make yourself last, make yourself a servant to all, look out for other people. So the Bible, when it talks about humility, isn't an emotion. It's really more of a mindset that leads to a servant way of living. Also, when I think about humility, I generally remember C.S. Lewis in the back of my mind saying that humility is not this feeling of being, less than other people, or this kind of feeling like I'm not as good as others. It's really not thinking about yourself at all. The idea here is that life isn't about me. I'm not focused on myself. That's really what humility is about, is the ability to kind of forget about myself so that I can just be present with you and be what I need to be in that situation. Humiliation, there is a humiliation that takes place as an act of judgment, right? And that is when I am up here and I am put down low. So God will sometimes take people who are up high, like Nebuchadnezzar, and he will lower them by giving, he gave him a mind of an animal, and for 7 years he lost everything, and he would have been humiliated, not emotionally, but humiliated in the sense of, I have been lowered in my position. I'm no longer up where I was. Now, God did this for Nebuchadnezzar. It's very instructive because he did it for a redemptive purpose, and that is, he ended up redeeming Nebuchadnezzar and bringing him into a saving relationship with him, apparently, by the way that the text reads. The other thing is that there is an emotion connected to this, but the emotion is shame, right? So the way that shame works is that shame is the feeling that I get if I like let's say I'm reading your body language and I get the feeling that I said something that's disappointed you, or you're not really happy to see me. Like, if we were showing up on this and I would read the body language through the screen, like, you don't seem very happy to see me, And now what happens is I'm going to feel a little bit of shame, like, well, why aren't they happy to see me? Now what will happen is that right brain emotion will then jump over to the left side of my brain, which will interpret it. And then once my left brain gets involved in the interpretation process, I may say, well, it's because they think I'm worthless, or they think I'm bad, or they think I've done something wrong. And so that feeling of shame might lead to anger, like, well, why do they think that? I don't deserve to be treated like this. And I could find myself getting angry or withdrawing and wanting to hide out of a complete misinterpretation of just what I'm seeing on the screen, because it could be that you were actually interacting with somebody I can't see, and there was some, so shame is one of those interesting things. It's a reactionary emotion that I have when I sense that I am not bringing joy to somebody, when they are not happy to see me. And then where it can become toxic and shame becomes toxic is when our interpretations about that emotion and why I'm feeling it are leading into feelings like I'm bad, I'm worthless, I'm no good. Now, this last part about, is there a difference between Old Testament and New Testament on it? I would say in this sense, not that God has changed, but the structure that governs life for us has changed. When we were under law, life worked differently than when we are under grace. So under law, I have much more of a performance basis for life. Under grace, I have a new identity in Christ. I've been set free from my slavery to sin. I am a joint heir with Christ. I have all these blessings. There is no more condemnation. I have peace with God. So yeah, there's some really fundamental things that have changed and that have improved by being in grace that are effective in understanding that I am forgiven. I'm not defined by my failures. I'm not defined by my mistakes, and I'm not defined by what other people say about me or what I may feel about myself. So there's a somewhat extensive answer, but Nick, that may trigger some thoughts for you too.
Yeah, thanks, Marcus. Yeah, I think it's really important to recognize that God's heart towards us is that of a good father that wants to see us become who he's designed us and created us to be. So he does bring us correction. You asked, does God humiliate us? I would say no. Does God humble us? Well, yeah, sometimes life has a way of, teaching us some lessons that maybe we didn't learn any other way other than through painful circumstances. I'm reminded of Deuteronomy 8, where God says that he led the children of Israel through the desert for 40 years, and he caused them to hunger and thirst. Like, he let them get into a place where they were kind of in a place of need, and it was not comfortable. But he says, I did this to humble you and to teach you that man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes out of the mouth of God. So God won't humiliate us, but sometimes he'll bring us to a place of where we realize that we really need to depend on him. And I think that's what one definition of humility could be, is just depending upon God. And I know the core of the human nature sometimes is self-reliance and thinking, I've got it, or I can do it. And God really wants to teach us to depend on him. And then I think the second thing I would say just briefly is that it's really important to recognize the difference between what Marcus already brought up as toxic shame and then a healthy shame message. A toxic shame message is, hey, you're bad. Something's wrong with you. You're screwed up, and something's fatally flawed with you, and that's why we're not glad to be with you. And that's not the way God is, and that's not the way we're supposed to be toward one another. We're rather supposed to give what Dr. Jim Wilder calls gentle shame messages. And that is like, hey, no, we don't do that. You kind of told that joke that was a little off color, a little inappropriate. Like, hey, we're the kind of people that speak words that are life-giving and uplifting. And so that joke isn't appropriate. That person might feel a little embarrassed, might feel a little defensive or something, but that's a gentle shame message reminding them who they are as one of God's children that's called to act and behave a certain way, and calling them toward their true identity. So there's a very big difference between those toxic shame messages that say you are a bad person versus, hey, that behavior isn't best. Here's a better way that we're called to walk. Does that answer the question, Ginger?
I think it does. Thank you all. That was wonderful. Well, before we get started, I'd like to open us up in prayer, and then I'll turn it over to you guys, and we'll learn a little bit more about emotional capacity. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay. Heavenly Father, we just welcome you here today with us. We just come before you and ask that you open our eyes to what you want us to see during this teaching, and you open our ears to what you want us to hear, Lord. I know it may be something different for each person listening, but I know that you know, Lord, and we just thank you for your word and everything that it teaches us in life. And we just come before you, Lord, and humble ourselves to be ready to learn and to be open to you and your spirit, Lord. I just thank you for Nick and Marcus and the Deeper Walk Ministry and everything that they have brought to us at Celebration Church. We just pray blessings over them, Lord, as we move forward in this unprecedented time, but we know that you are holding us in your hands, and we are just grateful for the blessings that are in our lives, and I just pray that we'll continue to see them. In your sweet name we pray. Amen.
Amen. All right. Well, thank you, Ginger. It's always good to have a connection to Celebration. I've got many fond memories of my time there, and you guys have always been very gracious and generous with Deeper Walk as well. So, thank you for the opportunity to be back. This presentation today we titled ABCs of Emotional Capacity. And just to let people know, I do have a book coming out in about 1 month. It should be out the first week of May, maybe the second week of May, called Building Bounce. And this whole book is about emotional capacity and how we build it. And the ABCs of that book are really the ways that we do it. And so A stands for appreciation, and that is practicing appreciation can help us grow our capacity. Beliefs, and that is really making sure that we take our thoughts captive and we're careful about the thoughts that we let into our lives, and because our beliefs can suck the joy out of life for us. And then C isn't choices. C is connections, and it has to do with our relationships, our relationship to other people. And then how do we grow, more joyful relationships with others, and how do we grow a stronger, healthier connection with God? So what I want to do here is we're going to take a little bit deeper dive into what emotional capacity is, why it sometimes isn't as big as we'd like it to be, and give you a few tools of what you can do to help that. But if you are looking for that book, Building Bounce, it's coming out beginning of May, and the only place it's going to be available is the Deeper Walk website. So go to deeperwalkinternational.org. And you'll be able to find the book there in May. You may notice that we've got these 3 cups like we did in our last presentation. And the idea is that a little bit of emotional capacity, a little bit more. And they're parallel to this maturity connection of infant, child, adult. And one of the ideas behind this is that you separate out infant level maturity from child level maturity from adult level maturity, partly by how much weight people can handle and still act like themselves, still remain relationally engaged, and still have a synchronized personality. When we talk about acting like yourself, from a brain perspective, what we're talking about here is that when I experience little kids, when they first are learning how to experience upsetting emotions, their brain literally becomes a different person with each emotion that they experience. And what happens is that over time, they have to learn how to stay the same person with all of these various emotions. And if they are able to learn how to remain the same person with all these other emotions, we call them having a synchronized personality, that they have learned to synchronize what's happening internally so that there is a consistency to it, that they don't turn into a different person when they're angry. They don't turn into a different person when they're scared. They can remain themselves and they can regulate those emotions. And that is what we mean by emotional capacity, is that people have to grow their ability or their capacity to remain themselves and to regulate emotions. And so you look at a person's capacity to do this at an infant level. I have almost no capacity to deal with any kind of upsetting emotion. I'm completely dependent on other people to handle that for me and to help me recover. I have no inborn natural ability to recover from upsetting emotions. And so if people don't meet me where I'm at and help me develop those skills and that capacity, it just isn't going to happen. It's in from conception until about age 1, we are helping our babies grow the ability to experience joy. And from about age 1 to age 3 or 4, we're really focusing in on helping them learn how to recover from upsetting emotions and return to joy from all kinds of things so that they can act like themselves and they can remain their relational self and all of these things. So children who learn how to return to joy from all kinds of different emotions find themselves living much more fearlessly. Right? They're not afraid of anything because they know at the end of the day, they're going to be with mom and dad. They're going to be with people who love them. They've got really secure attachments with the connections in their life. They have developed a belief about life that says, no matter what I face, I can recover from it. I'm going to be okay. Life is going to be okay. And this is all going to be great. And the reason that I began feeling that way is that I've got secure attachments. I've got a worldview about life that says I'm not in this alone. I can recover from whatever comes my way. And so life becomes an adventure. I'm ready to try new things. But if I don't get that, right, if as an infant I don't get the security I need, if in my early childhood years I don't have people help me learn how to return to joy again and again from these upsetting emotions, if I don't get all of that, then I entered into childhood with a lot of fears, right? I'm afraid to try this because I might get stuck in an emotion I don't know how to recover from. Or I become afraid when people get angry because I don't know how to return to joy from anger. Or I get afraid when people cause me shame because I don't know what to do with shame. Nobody's ever been happy to see me when I'm in the middle of shame. No one's ever helped me recover from that. And so the more emotions that as a child, no one has helped me learn how you recover from that. No one has stayed present with me and relationally engaged with me and comforted me. The more of those emotions that I'm on my own with, the more traumatizing that is, the more I shut down and become avoidant. And so the more avoidant I become, it's like, I just don't try things like that. I don't want to do that because I'm afraid of the embarrassment I might feel. I'm not going to try that because I'm afraid of the anger I might be subject to. I don't want to try that because I might get angry and people don't like me when I'm angry. In other words, there's all kinds of things that begin shrinking your life and making it small as a child because you feel alone with these things and no one has taught you the skill set that you need to return to joy from those. So what you didn't get as a child can have a profound effect on how much emotional capacity that you have as an adult. On the other hand, if I did get all of these things and I did get most of these skills pretty well built, by the time I'm 4 years old, I can be a very secure person with a lot of adventure in me and a sort of fearlessness that's ready to go out into life and try all kinds of new things and isn't afraid of emotions because I know people will still be happy to be with me and I know I can recover. And if I go through childhood like that and I learn the skills in childhood of how to take care of myself and how to, get back from that, then when I get to my adult years, I'm ready for that big transition into this adult world where the problems get bigger and the emotions get bigger. And I'm not now as an adult, I not only have to deal with my emotions, I've got to deal with your emotions too, right? And that is, I've got to figure out how do I find a win-win here so that I can find my own peace and joy, even if you're not feeling peace and joy. And if I am stuck in a position where my peace and joy is dependent upon you having peace and joy, that means that I am not functioning at adult level maturity. I am stuck in what psychologists tend to call codependence. And that is that my peace and joy are completely dependent upon you being at a place of peace and joy. Adults have the ability to separate themselves from that and say, well, even if you can't get there, I have learned how to take care of myself. I'm going to be okay, but I will do what I can to help you. There are children who grow up around people where their caretakers or their parents are actually asking the child to make life okay for them. So in other words, the child is having to parent the parent instead of the other way around. Now that can really mess things up because now the child may look like they have a lot of emotional capacity and they may look like they're really mature because they handle such, weighty stuff. But honestly, what's happened is they've been robbed of their childhood and they've been robbed of the ability to live with joy. And they feel like they're only there to be used and they're only there to be used by other people to help them recover. So, there's a lot of things that can go wrong with this, but the idea is that as an infant, I need somebody else to help me deal with life's upset. And I'm completely dependent upon them to deal with the upsets in life and to comfort me. I have no capacity to comfort myself. As a child, I'm beginning to learn how to comfort myself and how to take care of me. As a child, I'm not supposed to have to comfort my mother and father and make life okay for them. I'm not supposed to have to comfort, other people. Not that I'm callous or uncaring, but it's not my primary job. I'm supposed to be learning how to take care of me. And then as an adult is where I am supposed to be learning, now that I know how to take care of me, how do I take care of you too? So, and if you can't be helped, can I still be okay? So that's kind of adult level maturity. And that's where we're heading. So let's take a look at what we've just discussed here is the idea that a trauma can stunt our emotional development. And what that means is trauma is the absence of the good stuff that I need in order to grow the skills that I need. So if an infant doesn't get comforted, the infant doesn't have to be abused, doesn't have to be smacked around, doesn't have to be shaken, right? Simply by not having somebody pick them up when they're crying, not having somebody comfort them when they're upset, not having somebody meet them in their big overwhelming emotions and be present with them and say, don't worry, I'm here, and be comforting and a source of resistance by what they don't get will actually traumatize them in the sense that they simply won't develop that ability. They won't develop that capacity. And so they are going to find themselves moving into their childhood years afraid of the emotions that they didn't learn how to get back to joy from. This is we call that a trauma. That's the term I learned from Dr. Jim Wilder. It is and this has to do with what doesn't happen to us. Now we got a picture of a dead plant here, and it's just illustrative of the idea of what can happen to things when they don't get what they need. Right? When a plant doesn't get the water that it needs, right, it can die. And in the same way, so you don't have to do something bad to the plant in order to kill it. You simply have to withhold the good thing that it needs. In the same way, you can kill a child's emotional development by what they don't get, right? And what they need is somebody to be happy to be with them in their upset emotions and be present and relationally engaged with them as they recover. So we all needed that. Our children need that. You know, people that we interact with are looking for this. And one of the goals here is to begin to realize if I didn't get that as a child, if there are holes in what happened. So maybe people were happy to be with me when I'm sad, but they weren't happy to be with me when I got angry. I may have the ability to return to joy from sadness, but I don't know how to return to joy from anger. That means I've got holes in my maturity development. Part of what we want to do here today is take a look at what kind of holes can develop and what do we need to do about it? Because the solution to trauma is simply that we have to learn new skills, right? I've got to go now and develop habits and practices that I missed out on growing up. It's a little bit like if you didn't learn how to speak Spanish as a child. As an adult, you still don't know how to speak Spanish unless you go in and you learn that skill. So in the same way, if you didn't learn how to return to joy from certain things when you were little, you're going to have to put in some work and some focus and intentional work to develop that skill now that you're in your adult years. So this is A trauma. The other one here is B trauma that can stunt our emotional development. That is, you can also kill a plant by stepping on it, and doing bad things, putting poison on it and whatever else. I heard a young boy one time say, well, if I wanted to kill a plant, I'd cut it, I'd cut it with scissors and I'd set it on fire. And I'm like, well, yeah, that would be B trauma, right? Because B trauma is bad stuff that happens to us. Now, here's the thing. B trauma is actually easier to resolve than A trauma because B trauma is about healing the emotion, the memory of the bad thing that happened to me, whereas A trauma involves learning a whole new skill set. So B trauma can actually get resolved more quickly in most cases than A trauma if people will go through the emotional healing process. But we'll talk more about that here in just a moment. So let's talk about it. A trauma is repaired by learning new skills. Now, what I mean by learning new skills is if you go to thrivetoday.org, it is run by some friends of ours, Chris and Jen Corsi, and they have taken Dr. Jim Wilder's life model program and they have reduced it to 19 skills that everybody is supposed to master in their life. And these 19 skills help us get the basics that I need as an infant, as a child, as an adult to begin developing and growing my maturity. So learning these 19 skills is meant to be a repair process for the A trauma that I have had in my life. And so this becomes very important. We'll talk about a few of these, but let me give you a couple of examples of a skill that might be missed. Probably the most important skill that most of us miss growing up is the ability to quiet. Right? So quieting is the ability to take a deep breath, sit still and be okay, sitting still and being quiet. Most of us who struggle with this, we need constant distraction. It's like, I can't just sit still and be quiet. I need to have a TV on. I need to have music playing. I need to have somebody talking to me. I need to be active. I need to be doing something. And I have never mastered the ability to simply be quiet, be still, and to, from that stillness, go into a place of appreciation. And from that place of appreciation to connect with God, and then maybe back to appreciation and then back to quiet. And I've had a nice time. And what this quieting does is it allows my nervous system to just sort of calm down and get a break. If I don't learn how to quiet, then it highly increases the odds that I'm going to be emotionally unstable, right? That I can't handle much. It drives me a little bit crazy. So if you want to work on a skill, one of the skills that we want to work on here that helps with a trauma is the skill of quieting. And so this is the idea of taking deep breaths, closing your eyes. And if your mind is just bombarded with thoughts, it's like, how do I quiet these thoughts? And can I be still for 30 seconds, for 1 minute? And then how do I fill my mind with things that are good? And now I move from that quietness to thinking about what is good and beautiful and lovely and excellent and praiseworthy, and fill my mind with these things. And if I can do that, then it means if I know that I can quiet myself after whatever emotion I feel, I stop being as afraid of that emotion, because the ability to quiet from it is a really important skill. A second skill would be the ability to practice appreciation and to find joy on your own by pulling up memories of joy or thinking about things you anticipate with joy, and being able to, out of that quietness, think about things that are joyful, enter into that joy, and then out of that joy, come back to a place of peace. So if there are two skills that you want to master right now, it's because, a trauma has kind of kept you from building that form of capacity. It is practicing quieting, and it is practicing appreciation. So I have a little bit more to say about this as we wrap up. So B trauma, on the other hand, is not repaired by learning skills. B trauma is repaired by emotional healing. So if you take a book like the one I wrote, Understanding the Wounded Heart, that's talking about B trauma for the most part. And what we're talking about there is, if bad things have happened to me, then I may have to go through some of the spiritual warfare processes of forgiving people who have wronged me, renouncing lies that I've come to believe because of what has happened to me, and getting rid of the demonic attachments that have formed because of this. I may also need to connect with Jesus in listening prayer so that he can meet me in these wounded places in my life so that they can be repaired. So B trauma is more about, how do I forgive? How do I get rid of demonic attachments? And how do I experience the presence of Jesus? Because when I went through that bad thing the first time, I didn't feel like he was anywhere around. I didn't feel connected to him. I felt all alone in what I was going through. This is what prayer ministries are for. It's to be able to make appointments with people who can help you pray through and walk through this kind of healing prayer for the bad things that have happened to us in life. So if you go to our website at deeperwalkinternational.org, you go to contact us. Underneath that, we have a referral network, and there's one on Emmanuel Prayer Referral Network. If you're looking for somebody that you might be able to talk to process with, you can go there. You can go to that network and see if you can find someone who would be willing to do this. There may also be people there at Celebration that would be willing to meet with you virtually by via the internet to do this kind of prayer work together. So B trauma takes a different kind of solution than A trauma, right? A trauma is about learning skills that I missed out on. B trauma is about healing bad and painful memories that I have in my life. Both of those were important repair pieces that need to take place if I am going to grow my emotional capacity and move from being stuck as an infant to a child to an adult, or wherever I happen to be in that spectrum, or repairing even just a hole in my maturity, so that while I can function like an adult in some situations, when I get this particular emotion, I fall into this hole and I don't know what to do. So that's where we start, understanding A and B trauma, how they affect things, and what the repairs are for those. Now, with that in mind, let's look at the brain science behind this. And there are two brain essentials that are crucial to emotional capacity. All right, number one is what Dr. Wilder calls the joy bucket, right? So the joy bucket is the right, you might know it's like a brain could be, is like two halves, two hemispheres, and they're mirrors of each other. And if you look at them physically, they look identical. So on the front of the right, there is a part called the prefrontal cortex, and it's right behind the right eye. And on the left has one, and it has a left prefrontal cortex over here. They look identical, but they have very different functions. Your joy bucket is that right orbital prefrontal cortex on the right side of your brain, right behind your right eye, and it can grow, honestly, to be a significant part of your brain. But this part of your brain only grows as we master the experience of joy. That is, as we master the ability to feel joy on demand, if you will, to grow our capacity to quiet ourselves, to think about things that are joy producing, to dwell on those, to re-enter into those joyful moments. And the more of that we develop, the bigger this part of our brain gets, the more capacity to even experience joy that we have. So if you are a low joy person, right, you're just mildly depressed all the time, you always struggle with this, one of the things that you want to really work on is quieting and appreciation as the two main tools for building your joy bucket, which is building your capacity for joy. Now, there may be some other things that have to happen too, because if that's related to bad things that have happened, there's repair work that may need to happen with B trauma. But on the A trauma repair side, the main thing that needs to happen is the growing of this joy bucket. And the two main ways we grow the joy bucket are by the practice of quieting and appreciation. Those are the two main skill sets there. Now, I said there are two things that your brain needs, the joy bucket, but the second thing your brain needs are joy pathways. Now, what we mean by joy pathways are I need to develop these neural pathways in my brain that when I do go to a negative emotion, I have a pathway back to the joy center in my brain from that negative emotion. So for example, if joy is happening right behind my right eye and up here, then maybe when I get scared, my activity goes to the back, back part of my brain. So since I'm here in the back, I need a pathway from the back of my brain to the front of my brain that allows me to quickly recover from that emotion and get back to a place of joy. It doesn't mean that emotion ends and that I am all over it very quickly, but it means that that emotion doesn't control me and take over my life. I can still get back to this joy part of my brain that remembers who I am and how it's like me to act. Now, the catch here is that while you have one joy bucket and it's built by quieting and appreciation, these joy pathways have to be built back from 6 very specific negative emotions. So I'll share with you what they are. The first one's sadness. And that is, one of the things I need to master is how do I experience sadness and return to joy from that? My brain needs a pathway from sadness back to joy. So as a little child, what's supposed to happen is when I get sad, someone's supposed to notice, they're supposed to see, and they go, oh, you poor thing, you're sad here. Let me be with you in your sadness. Let me validate that sadness. Let me comfort you. And you go through that often enough as a child, and your brain sees what's happening, and your brain starts making the connection, oh, okay, sadness isn't the end of the world. I can recover from this. I will bounce back from this. It's going to be okay. So some of us get pretty good at returning to joy from sadness, but there's also anxiety. Now, I want to be specific here. Honestly, this word should be fear. Anxiety is a completely left brain experience. Anxiety is rooted in what we believe in our imagination about the bad things that we anticipate happening, whereas fear is reactionary. But we do need a path, but the path back to joy from fear also helps with anxiety. And it is again, the way we get through this is that when we are scared as little kids, we need somebody to come be present with us, to be relationally present with us, and to comfort us and help us recover. And this needs to happen again and again and again with a variety of different, scary, fearful situations, so that people learn how to return to joy. After a while, what happens is your brain stops being as afraid of fear because it knows it can get back to joy from it. The next one is despair. And despair is that hopeless feeling that says, I'm out of resources, I'm out of time, there's literally nothing I can do to fix this. But even when I get to that place, the question is, am I alone there? Or is there anybody who's happy to be with me when I'm in that place of despair and hopelessness? And, I'm at the end of my rope here. And so knowing that Jesus is happy to be with us, having a relationship with Jesus that where we experience him being happy to be with us in our despair is important. But also it's like if growing up, again, if there were people in my life I got to this emotion and they were still happy to be with me, they stayed present with me, they comforted me through this, I don't necessarily have to be afraid of that emotion now, because I know that there is a path back to joy from here as well. Next one is shame. Shame is that feeling that, again, that people are not happy to see me, that people don't really want me around. And then it gets interpreted in my left hemisphere as because I'm bad, because I'm no good, because I'm worthless, even God's disappointed with me. And so some people get stuck in shame and have no ability to get back to joy from it. So again, we need pathways back to joy from there as well. And then the last two are anger and disgust. And anger is, again, the feeling that just wants to stop a threat, something that I feel is threatening my peace, it's threatening my joy, it's threatening somebody I care about, it's threatening some issue I care about, and I get angry because I want it to stop, right? So again, a lot of times as kids, we had people who knew how to help us return to joy from one emotion, but they didn't know how to help us return to joy from all of them. And so it could be that you look at this and you say, well, I'm pretty good at getting back to joy from this one, but I have no ability to get back to joy from that one. And so by looking at these, you begin to realize, all right, I can see where some of the holes might be in my own emotional capacity that I'm going to have to work on. And that last one is disgust. And disgust is given to us by God to protect us from toxic things. So it's that part of us that wants to go yuck, or actually wants to vomit something, because it's meant to protect us from things that would be poisonous to us. But again, you get this into the left brain, and we can develop interpretations and narratives about this that just kind of keep us trapped there in feeling disgust for people and things we really don't need to be in disgust about. All of these are what we call the sad emotions, or the big 6 negative emotions. So the reason I have anxiety instead of fear was simply because it was easier for me to remember sad than sad. So, but technically anxiety is in the left brain and fear is in the right. So these are the two things you need for emotional capacity. You need a big joy bucket, which is about quieting and appreciation, and you need joy pathways. And the key to building joy pathways is VCR. And that is validating emotions, comforting from those emotions, and recovering. And the more often that you feel an emotion and that emotion is validated, and then you are comforted so that emotion stops being overwhelming and you are able to get back to joy, that very experience of recovering by returning to joy teaches your brain, begins to connect the neurons in your brain that say, okay, when I feel this, it's not the end of the world. Because when I feel this, one of these sad emotions, right, I can name it for myself. Like, wow, Marcus, I'm tell myself, I'm just feeling shame right now. I'm feeling shame that I, wasn't ready for this, or wasn't prepared for that, or, this person isn't happy. But then I can validate it, said, you know what, though, shame, that shame, even though it's really big, now that I validated that and named it, I can begin comforting myself and say, but you know what, that's not the end of the world. So I'm making my problem smaller. That's how you comfort things. I'm going to start, it's not the end of the world, right? I'm not going to lose my job. I'm not going to lose, my family. I'm not going to lose this. So I'm starting to comfort myself by making the problem smaller by what it's not going to do to me. And then I start looking at it from a new perspective and say, this happens. Sometimes you just got to admit that you were wrong. You just got to own this. Or, it may not be safe to own this, but I can go to God with this problem, and I can handle this, and I know God will forgive me for this. And then I can start making a plan about how I'm going to handle this with God's help, and who I might want to talk to about this. And in the process of all this stuff, what I'm doing is I'm making this problem that was so big, this shame that was so big, I'm starting to make it smaller, what it's not going to do, and I'm starting to make it smaller by a new perspective. I'm starting to make it smaller by new plans that I have for how I'm going to deal with this. And on all of these ways, I am comforting myself from that emotion, comforting by what's not going to happen, by a new perspective, and by making a new plan. And then if that makes my shame small enough that I'm beginning to feel like myself again, I feel like I can handle this, I feel like I could stay relationally engaged, that means I have recovered, I have returned to joy, and I followed this VCR pathway. Now, this is a really important skill, because it's important for parents to know that this is the process that you need to do with your kids to help them build their emotional capacity. It's good to do in any kind of, in marriage, when you're talking to one another, to realize that you need to validate emotions before you try to comfort the other person. In other words, before you try to make them feel better, you need to see where they're at, see this is the emotion, name that emotion, validate that emotion, and then begin comforting them. And you can even begin to learn to do this for yourself. Like, I need to validate my own emotions. I need to comfort myself by making this problem smaller, new perspective, new plan, and then I will recover. In this way, I can begin to grow stronger pathways in my brain back to joy by practicing this VCR pattern over and over and over again. So it's a lot of information, but let me hopefully this is helpful. Let me give you one last little thing here, and that is, we talked about appreciation. Let me just talk about how to practice appreciation and give you some different strategies for it. So we're going to look at 4 things. We use the word game, right? The word game for remembering these. And that is gratitude. What I mean by gratitude is, like this lady in this picture has a cup of coffee, and, I've got my mug here. Gratitude would be, I'm just so thankful my son made coffee this morning, right, without me asking. My daughter took the initiative to bring me this mug and make sure that I had what I needed. My wife came and she did made sure that I was set up and undisturbed for this. My son set up the lighting so that I would, look better than average. And and so what I'm doing when I'm being grateful is I'm thinking back in my recent past, like just today, what do I have to be grateful for today? And I'm like, wow, I'm just really grateful that my son took the initiative to make coffee, that my daughter was looking out for me and brought this to me, and that my wife's been doing this. And I'm just so grateful that those things happen. So now that I felt that gratitude, I can really literally feel my shoulders relax a little bit, like, it just feels good to, be here in this place of gratefulness. I can feel my breathing get a little bit deeper. And I'm thinking to myself, I need to tell them, I need to make sure that I express my gratitude to them and let them know how much that meant to me. People who become really, really good at this grow their emotional capacity. Because if you know that you can get back to a place of appreciation, if you know that whatever emotion you're in, you can find this place of appreciation and practice this gratitude, and you can stay there for a couple of minutes at a time, then it teaches your brain that you can recover from this, that it's not going to be overwhelming. So I encourage you, let's think about this. So gratitude is, what is there in my present to be grateful for? So I'm grateful that while I can't do all the things that I used to do, that I have internet to connect with people. I'm grateful that I got my family with me as we go through this. I'm grateful for all these other things that I've mentioned. And, if I'll spend a good 5 minutes or more just stopping and being in that place of gratitude, it literally begins to grow the joy center in my brain, this joy bucket in my brain, so that my emotional capacity grows. Let me give you a second way that we grow appreciation, and that's through anticipation. So anticipation has to do with the future, right? And that is, well, what am I looking forward to? And what happens to a lot of us when we get into a place of despair or depression, we can't think of anything that we're looking forward to. We can't think of anything that sounds fun. And so we're like, well, what am I anticipating? So one of the things we try to do is make sure that there is always something that we can anticipate with joy out in front of us. It could be as simple as, hey, we're going to have tacos, on Tuesday, or it could be, we're going to have pizza tonight, or it could be, hey, I'm going to take a walk with my wife later because it's a sunny day, or I am looking forward to movie night on a certain night, or I'm looking forward to playing Yahtzee with the kids. But what is there that I have to anticipate that I'm looking forward to? It doesn't have to be earth-shattering or life-changing, just something about that. I'm like, oh yeah, that'll be fun. And by letting my mind get in sync with that, again, I kind of feel myself relaxing. The appreciation helps me quiet. Now, by thinking about what I appreciate, counting my blessings, so to speak, I begin to experience some greater peace. And then there are memories. And this is a huge category because we all have memories of things that times when we were really happy. And I encourage people all the time to think, you can think about memories, like we all have cell phones these days, right? So cell phones get bars of connection. And I see I've missed several calls just while I've been talking today. And these bars of connection, you can be thinking about as not just they measure my connection to the internet, but the question here is, what is your connection to joy? Where are the memories where you felt the most connected to joy? And for me, I often go back to Little League baseball, or I go back to being at the lake and being out on the boat, or skiing on the water, or I go back to specific memories with my wife and specific memories with my kids. I go back to vacation moments. I go back to times in nature. But the idea here is it's a great idea to begin collecting memories where your joy levels were really high, so that you can revisit those memories again and again and again. And you think about them as, do I have 4 and 5 bar joy memories? I want to go back to those. I want to connect to them as often as possible. And then finally, we have experiences. And this is the idea that I want to create experiences that can spread joy to other people. So how do I, what are some experiences that I could create for others by sharing a gift with them, giving them encouragement, connecting with somebody else along the way. And so this has hopefully been helpful. These are some practical things you can do to begin growing your joy, understanding a little bit better how it is that we return to joy from upset emotions. All right, Ginger, are we about done?
All right. Yes, that was wonderful. Thank you, Marcus. Sorry, I got kicked out for a minute and had to join back in. So I hope
no problem.
you.
There's a lot of material. It's easy to just get, going and going and going. But
well, it's so good. It's just like good information to have, and especially for parents. As a parent, I really appreciate that. Just raising young children, it's good to have and to be a little more aware when they need us. Yeah.
Yeah, it is helpful to understand how this works, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate you guys and Deeper Walk and your time. So we hope to have you back again. I'm sure we will.
No, I appreciate it, Ginger.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.